Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Sparesbox. Today we're back on the Sigma. It's brake and suspension day, so we've got front pads, front brake lines, we've got heaps of suspension bushes, and we've also got basically most of the front steering stuff to change. So we've got a pitman arm, we've got an idler arm, and we've got some outer tie rod ends, I believe. So we should be able to pretty much freshen up the whole front end. And that's pretty much the only thing left to do for roadworthy. Brake master cylinder, I'm not sure if I mentioned that already, but we've got one of those to go in as well, because this one I think's got a bypass or a leak internally because the pedal drops away. Like, there's got plenty of brake pressure if you stab the brakes, but when you sit on it, the pedal sinks away. So to me, it's got an internal bleeding or a bypass issue. So because there's no external fluid leaks, so realistically, there's only one place the fluid can be going. So we're bound for some more adventures today. Chuck plenty of parts at the car, and hopefully by the end of it, we'll be ready for a roadie. So let's get into it. We've just changed our pitman arm over, which is basically the steering arm off the bottom of the box. There's a ton of splines in there. It probably looks like about 28 or 30 splines in there. So there's any amount of ways that you could potentially index it on that shaft. But luckily, it's actually marked both on the arm and on the shaft of the box. So you basically just, I was going to mark it anyway, but looking at it, it's very clear that there's marks on both the old and the new part and the steering shaft. So we've just lined those marks up and put it back on and zip the nut up. So now we're going to move on to our idler arm, which is a very similar part, but it bolts to the left-hand rail, and it basically allows the rest of the arm and mechanism to be supported on the passenger side of the car. So now we're going to undo that, pull it out, and we'll see what steering arms we've got, and we'll swap all that over and get it all back together in one go. When you're doing a lot of your suspension stuff, especially in older cars, it's really good to put the parts side by side before you go fitting them into the car, for two reasons really. A, they don't get dirty, and B, you know what you're putting in before you go and go down to a wheel alignment and potentially they go, oh, we can't find out what's wrong, something's not right, it's not square, whatever. So yeah, really simple to just put your parts next to each other. This thing came out of the bag and the L bracket was 180 out, but it's super simple to just spin it around, so there's no problem with that. So that's all good. Everything else looks good. The dimension here looks the same. The offset in the arm also looks the same. So now we're basically just going to bolt this one in. Then we'll move on to our steering inner and outer, well, they're not tie rod ends, I guess. I'm not sure what they're called in a steering box style setup, but yeah, basically the inner and outer joints, we're going to change those and keep on trucking. I've already noticed this one's 10 mil longer approximately here. So we'll most likely just trim that down because there's plenty of thread in there, and there was only one listing for it. So potentially the later model Sigmas have a 10 mil longer outer joint. So we'll work around that, but 10 mil, trimming the 10 mil off, that's not going to be an issue for what we're doing with it. So happy days, but yeah, we'll throw this in now and keep on going. Nailed it. So you can definitely see it's longer. It's actually a fair bit longer than 10 mil too, but the bend's in the same spot, so I'm just going to cut it. A lot of these older style steering joints and suspension joints come with a grease nipple. It's pretty important that you fit it, even if you're not going to grease it yourself, because if the nipple's not in the port on the bottom of the joint, it's going to fill with water and it's basically going to kill it really quickly. So yeah, just quickly screw it in there. They seem to always come with them. I haven't seen one that doesn't come with the nipple. So yeah, just literally just finger tight and then nip it up with a shifter or whatever, if you can find a 6.5mm spanner or whatever it is. So whack it straight in. Same deal. They also come with split pins, make sure you use them. We're not going to put a split pin on the driver's side outer joint because there's no left and right hand thread on the driver's side to actually spin without undoing this. So to make any adjustments in the wheel alignment, you've got to take the outer end off the hub and either lengthen or shorten it. So for that reason, we're not going to actually put a split pin in that side, because when it gets in alignment, they'll have to take it out anyway. We're definitely going to note it and let them know that we have removed it though, in case for whatever reason they don't have to touch the alignment on that side. They can just put the pin in for us. But we'll throw this left side in, then we'll move on to some brake stuff. Soup. Delicious. You know what I like about soup? It's nothing. Ah! Got dirt in my ear. Well, it's been a bit of a mixed result type of day, as sometimes happens with project cars. We try and show you guys what actually happens, not the magical Discovery Channel version. Brake master cylinder, the rear fitting is different on this car. I'm not sure why, but I've done some digging and it would appear that that's a crossover master cylinder, probably from another car of the time. The PBR master cylinder was actually sourced within Australia, whereas the earlier Sigmas had a Japanese sourced brake master cylinder. So that could have been from a Falcon or a Commodore of the time, and they've literally just whacked it in because that's what they could get. But unfortunately, that means the replacement one that I ordered is incorrect, and also the part number I got that part number off the internet. It wasn't a Sparesbox listing, so yeah, unfortunately they didn't list one at all, but they do supply a lot of Protex stuff. So yeah, basically found a Protex part number that I thought was correct, but upon further investigation is not quite 100%. We could have spent a bit of time cutting up the brake lines and making it work, but I kind of feel like we should probably just get the right one. It's not, to change the fitting on that line, we've kind of got to pull the line out of the car, and by the time we did all that work, we may as well just buy the right one. But yeah, it is what it is. Front pads are actually fine. We did get some new ones to change. Same thing with in the rear end. I mentioned before the PBR master cylinder was Australian made. Total opposite setup in the rear. So this has a Japan sourced diff in it. We thought it was going to be the Australian style diff, so we ordered the brake shoes and also the wheel cylinders for the Australian diff. But yeah, unfortunately, it turns out it's the Japanese sourced one. So we've now got the correct parts underway for that as well. So I think we've found the correct brake master cylinder finally. And yeah, same thing with the wheel cylinders and also hopefully some brake shoes. So we did rebleed the brakes though, because obviously this thing still needs to move. It doesn't live on the hoist. We've still got projects like Adam Sylvia, which we're going to be working on tomorrow. So yeah, we're pretty busy at the moment in the shed. So trying to not tie the hoist up when we're trying to get other projects done. So Adam's car is getting a lot of work on and off camera at the moment. So we're really trying to push forward with that project because tracks are opening up in New South Wales quicker than we'd anticipated. So Adam's keen to get on the track with that. I'm keen to get on the track with the ICE 200, which we've got some upgrades happening on that as well. But yeah, it's kind of, everything's happening at the moment. So we're, can't leave this thing tied up on the hoist. So we're going to pack it up for today and get to chasing some parts. And we're back. We have our new master cylinder, which has a bit of hose on it for bleeding. We'll get back to that later. But this is actually a Commodore one. It was the only one I could find with a 12mm rear outlet and the front outlet's in the correct position. Bonus points, this one actually has a 1-inch bore instead of a smaller bore. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it comes up a bit. The reason that is really good is because we've actually done a brake upgrade while we've been waiting for other parts. So we now have vented front discs and a Wilwood front caliper. It's a 4-pot. This is actually the same caliper that we run on the Cresta. These do have dust boots, so they can be engineered in Australia. Basically, the reason we didn't really go through all this on camera is because I'm not that keen to encourage people to do brake upgrades if they're not already confident in doing it. This isn't a bolt-on thing, so we've had a laser cut bracket fabricated to mount the caliper. We've had some machining done to make stuff work, and this is actually a Peugeot 205 disc. So this was already disc brake front obviously, but single piston sliding caliper and a solid disc, which was a smaller diameter. I think we've stepped the diameter up about 20mm on the front, but also on the rear we've gone a disc as well. So this was a drum brake rear car, and this whole rear disc conversion is from a U12 Bluebird or Pintara. And the bonus points with that too is this caliper, although not exactly the same caliper, uses the same pads as an S13. So we've got tons and tons of different pad options for this car. And obviously the Wilwood caliper, you can pick whatever pads you want with that as well. So we've got some pads coming front and rear for that, which will suit the car and what we're going to do with it. But yeah, the main reason we've gone for these upgrades is because of parts availability. Obviously you guys would have seen earlier in the episode we had a lot of issues not being able to get the correct brakes because of weird parts interchangeability on these cars. Obviously this has the Japanese diff, when this era the listing says it probably should have a Borg-Warner diff. So yeah, brake shoes and brake wheel cylinders were quite hard to come by, and actually not cheap either. So this conversion, realistically the discs are like $50 each, which is less than most of the parts we were needing anyway. The calipers and the bracket's actually the Bluebird bracket as well that we've modified. They were only like $100 from a wreckers. We've got the handbrake cables as well. We haven't installed those yet, but I've got the whole handbrake cable that we can, actually looks like we can just use those complete. And then we've had some braided lines made from the caliper to the diff, and then from the diff back to the body. And I've made some hard lines as well. So we'll go up and we'll have a few more shots of that so you guys can see what we've done. But yeah, basically in short, we've completely redone the braking system, and we haven't covered it because if you get it wrong, it's going to go really wrong. So if you're not confident in doing a brake conversion already, I'd definitely recommend to speak to experts. There's plenty of companies out there that actually do a lot of bolt-on kits. Hoppers Stoppers is one of them. We've seen Skid Factory use their stuff a lot, and it seems to go on really well. We haven't used it yet, but yeah, Australian made stuff, locally engineered and designed, so should suit Australian conditions. If you are overseas, by all means look at your local suppliers, see who's got stuff available. there's tons and tons of manufacturers doing brake upgrades for all sorts of weird stuff. So yeah, jump online and check it out. We've got our brand new brake master cylinder here on the bench. We're about to do a bench bleed. We've got every port from the master cylinder actually running back into the reservoir. This one's a little bit tricky because the rear fitting's obviously an M12 and we don't have any M12 backing nuts. So I've just got a 1/8 NPT barb and wrapped it in electrical tape, and then just run a bit of vac line with some bunny tube on the end of it. So that'll just sit in there as well. It's not ideal, but there's literally no pressure on that. So all we have to do is stop air going back into that. So the electrical tape will be fine for that. I mean, normally when it's the 10mm tubes and nuts, that's nice and easy, and we've got plenty of that stuff lying around. But yeah, this is pretty important to do, because if you don't do it, you can get air pockets in the master, and then it's a nightmare to try and bleed it on the car. So 5 minutes on the bench could save you 2 hours in the car. So we'll bleed this up. It's pretty simple. You just got to, screwdriver's nice and easy. Just push it into the back of the master where the booster or the pedal pin on a non-boosted car would be pushing it in. So yeah, basically just give it some pushes and it'll start pulling the fluid through, and you'll be able to see when the air's coming through. There's tons of air in it, and now it's starting to feel, it's actually very similar to bleeding brakes. You can feel more resistance in this when there's no air in it. You can kind of feel like you're getting a good pedal, if that makes sense. As soon as you do that, it starts to pull air. So you want to have it in the fluid all the time. Oh, come on. We originally actually got the information for the Sigma to Commodore brake master cylinder conversion from Racecraft. Those guys have got another YouTube channel. They do all sorts of stuff. It's really interesting. But the things that I saw that those guys are up to, they've done multiple Windsors, small block Fords into Sigmas. But yeah, they've talked about doing the brake master cylinder conversion. They've also got heaps of information about putting larger Borg Warner diffs into Sigmas as well. So there's yeah, plenty of cool info, but the one thing they do mention is changing the reservoir over from the original Sigma one. Unfortunately, the Sigma one doesn't fit this master cylinder. I think whatever's happened, the manufacturer of this master cylinder has probably superseded a couple of different ones together, and unfortunately that means that this master and the body of the master and the reservoir don't interchange with the original Sigma one. But from memory, a Falcon or another car of the era actually has a just a vertical, not an offset style master cylinder reservoir. So next time we're at the wreckers, we'll just go and try and find one of them as well. So just the usual wrecker things. But yeah, this is kind of a bit more old school hot rod, this car, mix and matching original stuff to get a better result. And so far I'm stoked with it. Like the rear brakes are a prime example of that. Pretty much all off the shelf bits with the exception of an adapted bracket. So yeah, all of that's just coming together really well. So we'll bleed these brakes up, and then we're pretty much done for the day.